and I made a connection based on one thing you said. And I was thinking back to our memes, and we're sort of joking. There's this consulting joke: no personal life, no problems, right? Because you have no personal life because you're always working. But when you were talking about the chemical that reduces that human bonding, I was thinking, ooh, like there is some science behind that, why that's happening. It's almost like I've seen consultants make excuses not to be with family because I feel like we're almost suppressing that. Yeah. I don't know. I just think this is really, really interesting and understanding
or there's
why.
the other bit, which my wife has pointed out to me the past 2 years, which is, when I'm moody about things, she'll say, well, because for 20 years of your life, yes, it sucked to wake up early on a Monday morning, but you were in a different city, in a different place, eating at a different restaurant, engaging with different clients about different problems. And now you're just sitting at home and you're not going anywhere. Right. And so my brain architecture had wired itself to gaining a high off of getting on an airplane. And all of the stupid little things that go with it, like you gain global service status on United Airlines, right? And they drive you between your flights in a Mercedes through the airport, right? And this sort of stuff, that's all gone. All of it. Gone, right? And I know it sounds silly, but like that's part of the allure of management consulting in particular is travel. It really is for a lot of young kids, and it's just not there.
You can apply that to so many things that the pandemic just decimated. And that's why it's also a lot of the reason why relationships broke down during the pandemic, because actually our brain thrives on constant dopamine shots. And during the pandemic, particularly where there were periods of lockdown and stuff, we got so caught up in the mundane. Our brain likes to be stimulated by things. And if you were constantly stuck with a partner and there was nothing interesting going on, so you couldn't go out, you couldn't eat out, you couldn't go to places, and you couldn't mix with other people, and you were stuck in what became a really mundane and a non-exciting relationship, that's when it all started to break down. And that's because the brain wasn't getting stimulated. So you can apply that to, whether it's your job, whether it's a relationship, all kinds of different things. So it was having a massive impact on so many different areas of our lives.
Life became boring.
Yes, and our brain doesn't like boring.
No.
And
especially for people that like the travel, that like the different places, that like the different experiences, to then go from that to I'm sitting in a single room, I'm taking the kids to school every day, I'm picking them up, I'm in a routine. Whereas before I thrived on not being in a routine.
But even those people, even those people that just go down the road to the office and they saw 10 other people in the office, suddenly they're at home in front of the screen, they don't see those 10 people. It causes a massive change in your chemistry. Life transitions are hugely, hugely challenging to mental health. Things like leaving home and going to university, hugely challenging to mental health. Retirement, hugely challenging to mental health, which you think, I'm off, I'm going to go and bake myself on a Florida beach now for the rest of my life. It should be really good. Actually challenging because your brain architecture is work orientated and suddenly it's not working next Monday. One of the hardest things, and we've done quite a lot of work in this area, is long-term military professionals coming into civilian life. Their brain architecture is programmed by 25, 30 years in the military. They're given an absolute regime that they follow every day. They're surrounded by all the buddies that their life depends on. Their chemistry balance is governed by the military. So suddenly somebody leaves the military on a Friday. On a Monday, they've suddenly got to figure out how to use a cash machine. They've got to figure out how to live in normal civistry. They've no longer got the mates. They've no longer got this framework of events that happen all the way through the day. So they've got to figure out their own. People leaving the military really struggle. It's down to the transition. Their brain architecture takes months to adjust to a new way of living their life.
As you were talking, I was thinking, I've just been into a lot of true crime docuseries on Netflix lately. And I'm thinking people coming out of prison for a long period of time, it must be like, they must want to go back, right? At a certain point, right?
CrossFit explains why people reoffend to go back to jail.
There is real reason for that.
One of the things we didn't mention before this, which we might have put into the introduction, is Haley was actually the clinical director for Broadmoor and Rampton, which are two high secure hospitals in the UK. So in terms of her previous clients, Hayley has actually worked with the most notorious and dangerous criminals that the UK has seen for the last 30 years. She spent a lot of time in very small rooms with murderers, rapists, psychopaths. That's her previous client base.
Yeah,
So
I'm sure there's no stress associated with that either.
she used to thrive on it.
No, sorry. No, people often think, because I'm not very tall, I'm only 5'4", so I'm not very tall. But yeah, I did work with the most probably notorious criminals.
Well, listen, I know we're way over at this point, but listen.
I mean, this Zoom call doesn't scare you at all. So that's why you took Lockhart's call.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Explains a lot why you're so relaxed about Chris's random holiday beer drinking.
Awesome.
So have you written a book about that, about the prison experience and what you learned out of that?
No, I never have time. People always say I should, but I don't have time.
That would be a bestseller.
I just think I just think the idea of people under such stress, and of course they were under such stress to begin with, that they did things that were way without the bounds of normal humanity, right? So, and that led them into then being in a super artificial environment where people are afraid of them. I just got to think there's got to be a lot to be learned in that space. That must have
been a huge amount. Yeah. I loved working with them. I mean, and society judges, but actually when you understand what's brought them to be there.
Sure. Yeah. And I had a friend just related, right? And she worked strictly with heroin addicts. And she talked about how she loved that work because heroin addicts were so desperate for their next fix that they could be charming in ways you couldn't even imagine. And she said they were working you all the time. And she just loved the challenge of having to be on your guard. And I just put that as a moment of saying, I think you must have learned an awful lot. I would love to hear more about that somewhere along the way.
Yeah, you do. It does. And it makes you a really sharp clinician too. So you have to constantly think about, I loved it.
Yeah.